We are living close to old mines and possibly some new mines. And if you've been reading the newspaper, you know there's lots of interest in this. There have been some very, I would say, eloquent ads put out by mining companies telling us why they're the best people to do an important job, which is to get minerals and metals out of the earth so that we can reduce our fossil fuel consumption and so that we can power a green economy. And then others who equally eloquently will point out that the lands in which these proposed mines reside are often sacred lands to ancient tribal groups that still have descendants now in Arizona. There are beautiful mountains that people like to walk and explore and study nature in. So there's some really strong and persuasive interest at play here. And so we're grateful to our speakers who are going to give us some insight into what's at risk and what's to be gained if should we allow all these mines to go in. And obviously, it's not a question of just all these mines, but each one will have to be considered separately. Our first speaker will be Rob Peters. He's the executive director of Save the Scenic Santa Ritas. Before joining that group, he was senior Arizona representative for Defenders of Wildlife. And through that, he worked on issues that included Arizona mining. Also, Western water issues, public lands, transmission lines, and climate change effects on biological diversity. So he's deeply studied in the issues that are before us tonight. He authored major Defenders of Wildlife reports, has extensive experience analyzing mining proposals, Forest Service, and BLM management plans. And just in case you're wondering what else he does with his spare time, he's been a freelance editor, a college teacher, he's worked as a web programmer, cartoonist, and disco dance teacher. And so I suggest we all get together for a disco dance soon. That would just sounds like it would be so much fun. And Curt Shannon is currently the interim director of the Arizona Mining Reform Coalition. He's one of the founding members of a group called Concerned Climbers of Arizona. Since 2004, this group has worked to protect Oak Flat and other rock climbing areas that are threatened by mining activity or other forms of land use. His professional background is in electrical engineering, materials science, and product management. And so I'm hoping that he'll have a chance to tell us a bit about recycling of metals and minerals that could have an important influence on how we go forward. He has spent most of his career working with gallium arsenide and other compound semiconductors. He's done a lot of energy consulting. He's worked with a number of Indian tribes and solar development companies in Arizona. So as you can hear, we have some very deeply studied individuals and leaders in the field. The way we'll proceed is they will each have some bit, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, to just give us a view of what they're seeing before us right now with these mining issues. And after each has had that time, then we have time to ask questions. I really encourage you to write your questions down. If you're like me, questions can evaporate like dew in the morning sun. So let's write them down so we can ask and have a really interesting dialogue. So, Rob, I think it's your turn. You're going to share screen and we will be your audience.
Thank you. Let me make sure I've got my PowerPoint going here. And I will share. So you know what? Let me ask you guys real quick though. How many, since this is not a huge group, how many of you are pretty familiar with the Copper World / old name Rosemont mine? I'm just trying to figure out whether I should skip a bunch of slides and not do an overview. So it looks like, but Curt, it looks like you and May maybe. Oh, you are as well. Sorry, I didn't see your hand. And May, how about you? Are you pretty up on it? No, okay.
No.
Well, I guess I won't go too, I won't linger in that section
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, that's okay. Don't do that just for me.
Okay, so we're Save the Scenic Santa Ritas. We've got something on the order of 3,000 members. We probably have, I don't know how many, oh, Anna's out already, maybe 100 that are quite active. And we work closely with some ad hoc community groups, like particularly there's a very active group of neighbors in Corona de Tucson, for example. And we plan a lot of things with them and we work, we're looking right now at a hike that was also coordinated with the Sierra Club. So we do a lot of things in conjunction with other groups. Um, and let's see. Okay, and this is, of course, what we're trying to save. Looking, um, we're looking east. And one of the things that we saw on that hike, if I go back, right behind these folks, the whole valley behind them would be filled with mine tailings if that was the original plan that HUD Bay had was to fill the Rosemont Valley. So pretty much all the way up to Highway 83. So if you were standing at the Helvetia Lookout, you'd basically be about to step on some mine tailings. We had a lawsuit in 2022 that where a judge said they couldn't pile their stuff all over the valley because it was forest land. But there may be, and Curt, I don't know if you're going to talk about that, but are you going to mention the possible federal legislation?
Uh, I wasn't planning on it.
Oh, okay. I won't dwell on it. I'll just say that there's some horrible legislation that's been introduced. It's likely to come out of committee. It was actually passed last year by the House, and it essentially says that any mining company can take any um, federal lands that they want if they say it's necessary for their mine. So in that case, it's very likely that HUD Bay could move back onto the east side forest lands. So we're fighting HUD Bay. If you're not real familiar with the 1872 mining law, it's truly a horror. It makes mining the top, um, I was going to say Trump. It makes it the dominant use, the preferred use of really any public lands with, a few exceptions like national parks. But unfortunately, it allows foreign companies to take our public lands really on a whim. All they have to do is set up a U.S. subsidiary, um, and they pay no royalties. So essentially, they're taking our resources and destroying our places to recreate and centers of biodiversity for um, really nothing. What is going on here? Okay. It is not responding to my page downing for some reason. Not at all. Why is it not responding? Oh, now it is, I guess. Okay. Um, so this is, let me move all the people out of the way. So here's a map of where Copper World is. It's something like 20 miles south of Tucson. It's about 12 miles from Sahuarita, and it's within 1,000. It'll be within 1,000 feet of Corona de Tucson. To give an idea, this is from was published in Tucson Daily Star years ago when um, it was the Rosemont mine, but basically this is the same as what is in the current 2023 HUD Bay plan for Copper World. They're going to dig this pit on the east side, and they can do that because they have enough private land there. It was once national forest land, but it got turned into patented claims and is now their private land. And that pit is going to be approximately half a mile deep and more than a mile across. So one of the things that makes this a particularly bad mining project is there's no rail access and no real way to create rail access. Pretty much any other mine in the US is getting their ore out and getting their supplies in by trains, but that's impossible in this case. Or, it's certainly not in HUD-Bay's plans. So they're planning to run 40,000 truck trips per year, 24/7, with a truck more or less every 15 minutes, pounding along Santa Rita Road through the experimental range, and then hooking up with Rita Road. So we're looking at, I don't know if you guys have seen any of these pictures, but this is what, trucks right now are going across. There's a lot of dust in the valley, and folks with, breathing problems are having breathing problems because of the trucks. But of course, that will dramatically increase once the mine gets going. This is the route they're going to be taking, the blue line there up to Sahuarita, and then they'll hang a left on Sahuarita Road, and they'll go to I-19. And you can see that there's schools, library here, municipal buildings, and another school here. So the fact that these heavy trucks are pounding through here will be have a pretty dramatic effect on the quality of life, and indeed will threaten lives in Sahuarita. Back when it was going to be Rosemont, a little over a decade ago, an EIS was done. At that point, they were predicting, they were planning to go not this route, but they were planning to go from the east side right onto 83. And so they did in the EIS have to look at what that increase in traffic would do. And it predicted at least a tripling of traffic accidents and deaths. So we can imagine that might happen with the trucks now going through downtown Sahuarita. And of course, there'd be a huge increase in mine commuter traffic, likely backups onto I-19 and congestion near the schools. And of course, accidents do happen. This is a picture of an overturned truck hauling copper concentrate near HUD-Bay's Constancia mine in Peru. One of the things, our actions this Saturday, we actually, let's see if you guys, can you see me in the little tiny box? Can you guys see me, or do you only see what I'm showing?
We can see
what I'm
you
holding
up
up, or I don't know whether you guys can see me or not.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
But we have to, some people have to scroll up on their view to see you.
Okay. Well, I could show this later as well. We just mailed out these sort of the same size postcards that you get, from your politicians during election season. We just mailed 40,000 of those out to every household in Sahuarita, Green Valley, Corona de Tucson, Quail Creek, etc. And a second round went out on Monday. And the purpose of this is to get people to come to a town meeting in Sahuarita. And so one of the things that this is a critical year in, deciding whether or not the mine will be built. And so we've putting lots of resources into both litigation and public outreach. So that effort of this double round of postcards cost about $30,000. We had donated help in designing it. And one of the things we're trying to do is to get lots and lots of people in Sahuarita concerned about what's going to happen when those trucks start pounding through their city in terms of quality of life and safety risks, and get them to put pressure on Sahuarita, because Sahuarita is pro-mining. This is a shot of the mayor and council members happily wearing HUD-Bay hats. And I think I'll skip that. So talking about economics, following the money to Canada, this is, another reason why this mine makes sort of 0 cents. The copper for at least the first 4 years, according to the mining plan, every bit of it's going to go overseas, almost certainly to China, because that's where the big refining capacity is. Well, the profits are all going to go to the Canadian company, Hudbay. So we get, at best, we get a few jobs and a big environmental and economic mess. A year ago, we contracted with a top-notch economics firm. The head of the firm has a PhD in economics from Princeton, to do an analysis of what the real economic effects would be of the mine. And it turns out they're not pretty at all. And we did this to try to counter Hudbay's PR about how they're going to create 430 jobs and it will be wonderful and the economy's in terrible shape in Pima County and Hudbay is basically the savior. But when you look at the real impacts, it's really bad. There'll be significant hits on tourism and recreation. And when you look at what's happening regionally with the South 32 mine that is for sure going to go into the Patagonias, and there are other mines planned in others of the Sky Mountains, Sky Islands near us. So the hit to tourism and recreation is going to be really big. The economists predicted significant drops in home prices in Pima County. In just Corona Day Tucson, it could be $100 million. And one of the things that they looked at was, that immigration. Like we get more than 6,000 people a year move to Pima County from outside, and these are typically people like retirees who they're going to be living. They're not going to be working in jobs here necessarily. They're going to be living on investments and savings, and nearly half of all Tucson income is from investments and savings. So, one of the things the economists did was look at a very small decrease in the amount of people moving here, because they go, well, do we really want to go live next to a giant pile of toxic tailings, or would we rather go, I don't know, South Florida or some Costa Rica or someplace else? And it takes when you're looking at that number of people moving here every year, it just takes a very small percentage decrease in that to do a significant hit to the Tucson economy. Groundwater, of course, just for the first 4 years, they're predicting 2 billion gallons per year, rising probably to 4. And perhaps more. There's really no limit, and this is pumped out of the same aquifer that supplies water to Sahuarita Rita and surrounding ranches and communities. The tailings piles, this is something that's really scary. This is basically the fine dust that's left over after the ore is processed. And, basically it's the mountains of dust, just like there are over on, west of Green Valley right now, where periodically that dust has blown into the community and covered houses and so on. And it presents a real risk because it contains a lot of highly toxic substances, lead, cadmium, and arsenic. We know that prevailing winds at some times of the year will be blowing the dust off those piles. I mean, they do things to suppress the dust, but it doesn't, it's like it fails from time to time and the dust does blow into the community. So, and those piles are going to be incredibly close to Corona Day Tucson, about 600 feet from the nearest house, a mile and a quarter. This is copper. Oh, I should tell you, all of this mustard yellow here. Let's see. That's one of the places where they're going to put tailing piles. And you can see that there's Copper Ridge Elementary School right here, about little less than 1.5 miles away. Sycamore Elementary is a little less than 2.5 miles away. So there's a real health risk here, particularly with children from blowing lead. So this is sort of a theme here is this is probably like one of the worst places to put a copper mine, both from the perspective of the company and from the perspective of the community. It's like the whole thing is just crazy. Like, okay, so these 4 yellow things are where they're going to be putting their tailings, and they're going to be mining over here where it's green. The green pits are on the west side, and then the east side, the purple, is that big Rosemont pit we looked at a few minutes ago. And they're going to put tailings where the yellow is. So the question is, how do they get tailings from, the bottom yellow square, TSF/2, up to the big, we call it the F parcel, and then up to the north one that's abutting Corona de Tucson. And one of their big challenges has been, how do they get it from the bottom one to the middle F parcel? And what is not being shown on this map, that the gray in between those two parcels is BLM land, and they're doing everything they can to stay off of BLM land because that would trigger NEPA. And assuming with the current administration, we continue to have NEPA or some form of NEPA, they're trying to avoid that as much as they can. So, and I'll come back to that in just a second, but I just wanted to say one of the most depressing, frustrating things for me as I got involved in this issue is the state agencies that are willing to break and bend the laws to benefit the mining industry. And not surprising, the little miners here on the state seal. The second bullet down here was something that I found, kind of amazing. Right after Karen Peters was made head of ADEQ, she's currently the head. Her husband is a lawyer who, represents, among others, Resolution Copper. And one of the first things she told us in a meeting with our group and other environmental groups was that she was trying to change the culture in ADQ, and she had told everybody to stop referring to the mines as their customers, which kind of shows you where they're at. So they just a couple months ago really bent the process to grant the air quality permit. We are currently appealing that permit administratively, and we will likely litigate. And ASLD, the State Land Department, actually broke the law to benefit Hud Bay. And let's see, I was going to show you what that was about. Oh my goodness, I did one of these things, which I didn't mean to do. Okay. So let's see. I think I'll just jump to this picture. And so this purple line right here is a right-of-way that ASLD illegally gave to Hud B. And the reason for that, in this picture, we can see the BLM land in yellow that the mine did not want to go across. In their original plan, several years ago, they were going to put their tailings pipeline here where this green dotted line is. And then they decided, oh, they didn't want to do anything that would trigger NEPA or ESA, any federal stuff. So what they did was a backroom deal with the land department to get this right-of-way that runs right along on state land, on Santa Rita Experimental Range land. And they did it illegally without having a public meeting that they were required to. And it took us a while through public records requests to find that out. We did find it out. We sued them. Judge sided with us and said, you did it illegally. And there was a lot of shenanigans. Like they did it in the first month of the new Hobbs administration. It's by state law, they've got to get approval of the state land commissioner. She or he has to sign off. They didn't do that. They had a third level flunky sign it off. And there was a lot of email traffic back and forth between Hud Bay and ASLD saying, come on, give it to us fast. Give it to us fast. We need it fast because we don't know what the new administration is going to do. So we are in litigation right now because what the ASLD did, when the judge said they did this illegally, they just went ahead and held another meeting, this time publicly. So they got around, they weren't breaking the open meetings law this time, and they simply basically reapproved this. There's a lot of really legal niceties that I don't have time to go into, but basically, this right-of-way was never approved. It was just signed by this low-level person. So we're litigating again, both on the grounds of improper procedure and because the enabling legislation that created the Santa Rita Experimental Range says it can only be used for environmental and rangeland research, nothing to do with industrial pipelines. So let's see. I think let's say I mentioned that we're appealing the air quality permit, so I think I'm just going to jump right to so this is what big mining does all the time, right? They exaggerate the economic benefits, they downplay the economic harm, they downplay the health consequences, they take advantage of weak or friendly state environmental oversight, and they make economic deals with some sections of the community to turn citizens against citizens. One of the things they did a year ago was sign some contracts with the Carpenters Union to build the buildings once they get going. And so then what happens is when there's an air permit hearing, a bunch of guys get paid from the Carpenters Union to show up wearing their orange vests and talking about how great mines are and what a wonderful company Hud Bay is. And a part of different mines have different strategies, right? Like South 32 and the Patagonias, they've tried to be very visible and have lots of interaction with the community. Hud Bay takes the position, more or less, they just try to keep their head down and try to slide things through. Like the perfect example is that, probably hardly anyone in Sahuarita even knows about the truck traffic because they haven't released the truck plan, a traffic plan, and Sahuarita city government is on their side, so this issue doesn't even come up. They just try to slide it through. So, they Hud Bay says this. Pima County, they actually say Pima County is in terrible shape. Mine will be a lifesaver. That's not really so. Pima County's done exceptionally well in past recessions compared to other areas of the country. And as I referenced, the study we contracted says that the mine will hurt the economy. And Curt, this is sort of venturing into your area, I think, but this message, we hear this constantly. When we sent out these postcards, we got some emails back from people saying, you NIMBY, they call this NIMBY old hippies that should take the copper out of our cell phones, TVs, and pacemakers. I love that. But this is really, I think, a totally bogus argument. USGS, which has responsibility for maintaining the list of critical minerals, says it ain't so. A year or so ago, then Senator Sinema sent a letter along with some other folks, Cortez Masto, to the head of USGS, petitioning to have copper added as a critical mineral. He sent a letter back and said, nope. The U.S. has adequate supplies. There's a strong supply chain from friendly countries. Not, we get a third of our copper from recycling. It's not necessary. But there's a lot of right now political maneuvering in Washington which I will skip over, but to sort of fix this so that copper is added, and that will allow it to, among other things, qualify for subsidies and tax breaks. Another not so reason is saw a report where last year's report, a lot of U.S. copper mines, for a variety of reasons, are operating significantly below capacity. And the other total BS from Hud Bay that they tout all the time on their website and so on, that this copper is made in the USA, is complete bullshit. Their own plan says that for the first 4 years, 100% of the copper will be sent overseas, almost certainly to China. As I said before, they say that starting in year 5, they're going to do some refining on site. In that case, only a still sizable percentage will be sent overseas, but whether that will ever pan out, don't really know. And of course, the profits are going to go to Canada. So I just wanted to end by talking about, this will be no surprise to anyone who's been watching what's been going on with our federal administration, but there's no national strategy. I mean, there's just total craziness. If you were running the country, you would certainly go, if we actually, let's figure out if we really need more copper, and if we really need more copper, where can we get that copper? you know, to do the least damage to people's health, the economy, biodiversity, etc. And nobody in their right mind would plop a copper mine down where this is, but that's not how it works. You know, how it works is because of the 1872 mining law, any foreign company, US as well, but the dominant ones, there are more of them in the playground here in Arizona from more foreign companies than US, and they can just kind of, you know, go, you know, they're just looking at their stockholders' bottom line. That's it. Whether it makes any sense for the US or not is irrelevant to them. And um, oh, I had some brilliant closing statement I was going to make. I totally forget what it was, some last point. Um, you know, I think oh, yeah, I know what it was. I was going to sketch out a little bit about what our strategy is. Of course, you know, the table is crazy right now. We have no idea what's going to happen. We don't know if Trump's um, tariffs on China are going to decrease global demand for copper and whether that will make this copper mine less viable for Hudbay. But you know, our strategy is basically to make this mine look unattractive, both to Hudbay and to investors. Um, our analysis is that Hudbay does not have the money to develop this mine on their own. And so they need a deep pockets partner. And they're constantly, there was a newspaper article just recently, they're having high level talks with Saudis, United, or, suddenly blanking, Emirates, and Japan. So they're looking for a partner. And so our job is to make it look like that will be really difficult and to scare off the partners. And I think we're doing a pretty good job so far by um, tying them up in litigation and slowing things down. Um, if we can slow things down significantly, it may be that copper isn't so attractive, and as well as there are some new carbon-based copper substitute conductors coming on the market. And Curt, maybe you know more about those than I do. So I think I'll stop there. And if you guys have questions, I guess we're going to handle them at the end.
Yes, and again, I hope you're writing your questions down. I've got 3 so far myself, and put them in the chat if you like as well. Thank you, Rob. So much to learn there. And let's hear from Curt. I'm sure you've got some perspective to share now.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you, Paula, for inviting me to this meeting. And thank you for Rob for setting the groundwork for me. We're certainly fighting a lot of the same battles. You know, we're fighting Copper World also, and you know, we're fighting a little bit closer to home, the Resolution copper mine, and we're running into a lot of the same things. You know, we're fighting legislation. We're obviously opposed to the Mining Regulatory, you know, Clarity Act. You know, it's right on our name, you know, Arizona mining reform. So we're for reform, but that reforms the 1872 Mining Act in the wrong direction. It makes it even worse. That's not
Indeed.
the kind of reform we're looking for.
Mm.
And yeah, it'll be very interesting, you know, to see how the tariffs pan out. You know, who knows what's going to happen with the tariffs, but the price of copper has gone from about $5.25 on March 26th to a little over $4 a pound today. So it's currently plummeting. And, you know, who knows what effect that will have on investments.
The break even for Copper World, according to our economists, is somewhere around 350 to 370. So if it drops below that, they'll have a hard time.
Well, that's good. So as I was introduced, I'm Curt Shannon. I'm the Interim Director of Arizona Mining Reform Coalition, and I've been Interim Director for about 5 weeks since, Roger Featherstone, our founder, decided to retire.
Hmm.
And I'd like to go back a little bit to, set the groundwork, for the history of copper in Arizona. Uh, the 5 C's that we all learned about in school, copper, cattle, citrus, cotton, and climate, used to define Arizona's economy. But those 5 C's have definitely changed over the years. Today, only climate really drives the economy anymore. Uh, with tourism contributing $22 billion a year to Arizona's economy. That's in 2017, the last year that I have comparable data for all of the facets of the economy. And outdoor recreation makes up about half of that, about 9 to 10 billion of that 22 billion in tourism. Copper contributed about $5.7 billion in 2017 to Arizona's economy. And if you lump cotton, citrus, and cattle all together and call it agriculture, maybe, that contributed 4.8 billion again in 2017. So tourism clearly, the climate clearly dwarfs the other aspects of those 5 C's to Arizona's economy. Currently, Lakes Mead and Powell are about 1/3 full, and global warming, which is one of the topics here tonight, hopefully. Global warming is making the fundamental oversubscription of Colorado River water much worse than it already was. I mean, it was already oversubscribed because when they wrote the law of the river 100 years ago, they based it on 10 historically wet years, and we've never had years like that since. If not for favorable snowpacks in the Rocky Mountains for the last 2 years, we probably would have already been at Deadpool in both Lake Mead and Lake Powell. Now there's a temporary agreement apportioning Colorado River water that expires next year in 2026. And the new agreement is far from being negotiated. The upper basin states are arguing with the lower basin states, of which Arizona is one of. The upper basin states are saying the lower basin states should bear the brunt of the cuts, and we in the lower basin states are saying the upper basin, should take the cuts. So where does that lead of us? Well, less Colorado River water means more groundwater pumping, pretty much by necessities. And water levels in aquifers across the state have gone down a long ways already. There was a alfalfa farm called Fondamonte, which was owned by Saudi Arabia to grow alfalfa, and public outcry, for that. Fondamonte was allowed to pump as much groundwater as they needed to grow their alfalfa, which was then being shipped back to Saudi Arabia to feed their horses and cattle. And, enough journalists picked that up that the state government actually revoked some of their well permits. And, this is also very, very similar to copper world. I'm talking now about resolution copper, but, how much different are foreign owned mines from Fondamonte? all the profits flow offshore. In Copper World case to Canada. In the Resolution Copper case, which is jointly owned by Rio Tinto and BHP, those profits all go to either London or Sydney. All the copper will also get exported because, there's not smelting capacity here in the United States anymore to handle the additional copper. And Resolution claims that, this mine will supply 25% of the demand of the country's demand for copper. Well, that's great, but if you're going to ship it to China and then you have to buy it back from them, how does that really help your national defense or help your green energy industry at all? So the profits go offshore, the copper goes offshore. All the United States and the state of Arizona get are a few hundred jobs for the life of the mine, which is 30 to 40 years probably, and a huge hole in the ground and 1.5 billion tons of toxic waste that needs to be secured in perpetuity. And in this case, the preferred site for the toxic waste dump is on state trust land near Dripping Springs in the Dripping Springs Mountain. Uh, so, our view on the Resolution Copper Mine is that, it's probably good for the economy in the short term, but, once they destroy Oak Flat, which is a wonderful rock climbing area and riparian area, that people aren't going to go there anymore for that. So once they do that, it's destroyed. Whereas outdoor recreation and tourism is sustainable and can go on forever. And, I'll echo, what Rob said about being a terrible place for a copper mine. Oak Flat is also a horrible place to put a copper mine. It's been protected from mining by executive order since the Eisenhower administration in 1955, and it's on the National Register of Historic Places for its sacred character to numerous Indian tribes. It's the largest and best rock climbing area in central Arizona, and it's also adjacent to Devil's Canyon or Gone Canyon, which has been called by Maricopa Audubon the best riparian area in central Arizona. And, Resolution Copper has used the same divide and conquer tactics here. They've done it with Indian tribes, trying to offer them money and jobs. They bought off the Nature Conservancy by offering them a prime piece of land in the land exchange parcels that right is adjacent to one of their research ranches. And they've even found a group of rock climbers who they've promised millions of dollars to spend in other areas developing more rock climbs outside of the Oak Flat area. So I definitely know what Rob's talking about when he says, they use divide and conquer tactics. We're definitely seeing that. And I'll also echo the fact that Arizona has very weak mining laws. The Department of Water Resources allows mines to pump as much groundwater as they need for their operations. Now, technically, they can put a gallon limit or an acre foot limit on the amount that they can pump, but if the mine needs more, they just need to go back to DWR and ask for more. And no mine has ever been denied a permit to pump more groundwater. So, And yeah, ADEQ is, pretty fast and, with the environmental protections. They call their clients customers because all of their funding at ADEQ comes from permit charges. So they really have a conflict of interest. They need to grant the permits to get their funding to continue to operate, and that seems just wrong to me. And they've been sued twice now by our group uh, for allowing Resolution Copper to discharge mine waste into already impaired streams. In this case, Queen Creek. And I know there's something similar going on at South 32 as well. And the obvious problem with letting them pump as much water as they want with increasing water shortages is that mines have priority then. They can take as much as they want, but they essentially have to take water away from other residential and agricultural users who also desperately need the water. And that seems kind of wrong. Now, Arizona Mine Reform Coalition recently landed or secured a $50,000 grant to study the impacts of mining on groundwater in the Gila River watershed. And it will cover all the tributaries to the Gila River watershed also. So any mines down there, would, well, along with Resolution Copper, will be studied in that grant. And I think I'll wrap it up right there. And I'm more than happy to field any questions that you think I might be able to answer.
Thank you, Curt. I'll seed the questions with one on your most recent comment. So the $50,000 grant is for your coalition to do the study or to contract some hydrologist or someone to do that study?
Well, there are multiple parts to the grant. One of them is certainly to contract out to a hydrologist to actually evaluate the impacts of water pumping by mines in the watershed. And some of the grant money is for us to get the word out, to make presentations and publications and, get the word out as to what the hydrologist's findings are.
And you're hoping to get this done before Resolution would start doing their mining?
Well, we just got the grant money a few weeks ago, and so we're writing the RFP to put out to qualified hydrologists, and we'd like to get the study done in a year. Who knows how fast Resolution will get to work.
Hmm.
It kind of depends on how quickly they reissue the final environmental impact study, because the land exchange legislation specifically says after the FEIS is published in the Federal Register, the land at Oak Flat must be transferred to Resolution within 60 days.
Is there any chance that you could challenge the EIS on the basis that they don't have the kind of information that you're about to get? In other words, that there's something deficient in their findings because it doesn't include the kind of analysis you'll be doing.
Well, we've already sued them. Currently, that lawsuit is one of three, there's a organization called Apache Stronghold, which right now has their summary judgment in front of the Supreme Court of the United States. And then our group and some other groups, jointly sued on environmental issues on EIS deficiencies. And the San Carlos Apache tribe also sued. Now, the last two suits are currently stayed because as soon as Biden took office, he withdrew the publication of the final environmental impact statement.
Do you mean Trump?
No,
Do you say,
no, no. Trump issued it in his first term,
okay.
and Biden withdrew it immediately. And we're currently so the last two lawsuits by our group and by the San Carlos Apache tribe have been stayed, pending the reissuance of the FEIS. Once that is republished, we'll unstay them.
Hmm. All right. Well, we've got a question from Mabel, and Mabel, if I don't get this across, please just unmute yourself and elaborate. Are the references of mining contamination coming from active mines or abandoned mines?
Who's that for?
Well, I think that's for you, Curt, but Mabel just asked that a minute ago.
Hey, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, now that was for Kurt because he was talking about a lot of stream and tributaries or any type of groundwater contamination coming from mines. So that was I was asking his reference that the data that he was talking about, if those are from active mines or also includes abandoned mines.
Yeah, I think with respect to our lawsuit, which is allowing Resolution Copper to discharge into Queen Creek, I think, historical monitoring of Queen Creek has established that it's impaired for copper and cadmium and manganese and maybe something else. And I suspect it's from the smelter that used to be, there's not a point source evident for the contamination. They've just sampled water in Queen Creek. And, the theory is that, when the smelter existed in Superior, the prevailing winds carried that stuff to east into the mountains where the rain, took the copper and arsenic and other stuff and washed it into Queen Creek. But yeah, it's hard to stay, where it's impaired, exactly, or what the source of it is. But
Okay, yeah. I think that it's kind of like I know, like in the whole state, there's like thousands and hundreds of thousands, like even not registered, like abandoned mine. It could be bigger. I mean, big pits or just like a small adit or shaft. But even though they cannot seem very big, they can still produce some type of acid drainage, and that of course that will produce high heavy metal in the water or in the soil. And I think that's one of the big challenges that it presents here in the state, like about like all the abandoned mines that are not really well documented, and it can be a constantly source of contamination. But yeah, thanks for your response.
I know there are abandoned mines in the Patagonias that have been a significant problem when big rain events come, and I've seen them um, first run bright red, and then
Right.
a couple weeks later they're running white with, I think, aluminum substances. So it's very colorful, and the one of the mining companies there, the current mining companies, as part of getting their permits, says, Kurt, you maybe know which one. I'm not sure. I think it might have been associated with Hermosa. I'm not sure, but they did some mitigation there, which involved putting foam into some of the adits just to keep the stormwater from getting down into the workings from up above.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I know about like a lot of remediation, not only from the responsible mine company, but also for the Forest Service, because like those abandoned mines are pretty old and nobody's really responsible for that. And who's responsible then? Who
Uh,
So,
Nobody.
yeah.
You're muted, Stuart.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mabel, for your comment and question. Let's ask, I'm going to try to get Kate's question out there. She mentioned Senator Lujan has drafted a mining waste fraud and abuse prevention bill. And Kelly, neither of our senators have yet come on as co-sponsors. Do you have any thoughts on that bill, and would you recommend our lobbying, our advocating to Kelly and Gallego? Rob, do you want to start with that, or maybe Kurt, you're unmuted, and then Rob, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that particular piece of legislation.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
I do not either. I think I might have heard about it this last week, but in the middle of all the craziness we're doing, I didn't focus on it. Um, I do know that Kelly is a perennial disappointment, and we just heard with respect about Gallego with respect to oh my goodness, it's been a long day. I'm forgetting, the bad mining reform bill that would that I was referencing before, that would give mining companies the right to essentially take any federal land they wanted. That we're trying to get both Kelly and Gallego to say no to that one. But and we've been told that Gallego's staff sees the dangers of this bill, but he may not be so aware. So we're as soon as we get this Santa Rita push over in a week or so, we'll be trying to get people, our members, to write letters, emails, and so on to both those guys. But it never hurts, even if you're not aware of a particular bill, it never hurts to send them emails and say, we're really concerned about in general mining abuses, and we want you guys to stand firm against giving away more of our public lands.
Yeah, a guiding principle. And thank you, Kate, for bringing it up. Kate then mentioned that there's a letter that faith communities can sign on to, opposing what's called the Mining Clarity Act.
There you go. That's it. The Mining Clarity Act. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Kate. And then Dwayne put into the chat, there's an Earth Justice letter on the Lujan bill. It's in our chat, and I invite everybody to look at that. A side note here, as we see a tremendous move in our nation towards an autocratic rule, it behooves all of us to up our game a little bit. And maybe if you've been signing one petition a week, maybe you might start writing a letter once a week, or maybe even once every other day. Just an invitation to really respond to these calls from Kurt, Rob and Kate. All right. And let's
Stuart.
see.
Just sort of by the by, we work with a political consultant, and we just had this discussion again yesterday about the utility of signing petitions versus individual letters, and essentially a petition counts sort of like one letter, no matter how many people sign. That they're relative, according to our consultant, they're relatively useless, and the politicians don't pay hardly any attention whatsoever. They're more, now I'm just quoting him, but they're more generally used by environmental and other groups to garner contact information on folks that they can then involve in more meaningful ways. So that in general, signing a petition isn't very helpful, but sending an individual letter, email can be, because they basically count them, like they go, oh, we got 100 on this side and 20 on the other side.
Thank you, Rob. It means we all will have to work a little bit harder, but anything we can do to prevent collapse, I think it is worth the effort. And let's just see. There's a hand up, but a while ago, we've got a few Davids here today, but someone whose name is only David on his screen asked, how will the new mining school at the U of A affect the favorability of these mines?
I will say that we have reached out numerous times to the U of A and get absolutely nowhere. They could have played a critical role in that right of way I referenced earlier across the Santa Rita experimental range, because despite that the land is, effectively belongs to the state land department, there's a long-term lease with the University of Arizona for doing the ecological and rangeland research. We know that a lot of the scientists who do their research there are very much, against the mine and against the right of way and against the fact that the trucks will be, almost certainly what's going to happen is that because of the dust issue, that road, Santa Rita Road through the Santa Rita experimental range is going to get paved. And then, and on the rest of that road that's paved right now, on the northwestern portion, the speed limit there is 45 miles an hour. So if that whole thing is paved and those trucks are roaring down that road at 45 miles an hour, that does not speak well for the ecological integrity of the Santa Rita experimental range. But we have not been able to get U of A to do anything. And in fact, there's just coming up a sort of pro-mining conference at the U of A that has as its theme. It's more or less, and I'm just going to very baldly interpret it, how to co-opt the communities in which you want to mine, more or less. And we've talked about, we're stretched pretty thin right now, but we've talked about going and trying to have some sort of a protest or something. But yeah, U of A has been really, really disappointing, because you would think that they would act to protect that experimental range, but they seem to have no interest. And, we surmise a lot of it could be because of mining company support for the School of Mines, but don't really know. We just, it's a little bit of a black hole. All we know that we get nothing.
Okay. Well, looks like Paul, you have a question?
Yeah. Yeah. I have two questions. I think it was Rob said that we get about a third of our copper from recycling. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about what gets recycled and could we up that 1/3 to a greater amount? And then also, and I think it may have been from Curt, why is it that the price of copper is plunging these days? So those are my questions, and I'll probably have others as we go on.
I'm sorry to say, Paul, I can't answer your question I don't know enough about the nuts and bolts of recycling.
Would what are your thoughts, even just informally as an individual, or both of you, about the possibility of, doing some of the mining in our landfills to get some of these minerals, especially copper?
Kurt, what are you thinking?
Um,
Rather than digging it up, dig
I,
into what we've already tossed into the landfills.
all that, I'm just a pure layman on this, but I would just say it sounds scary to me to be digging around in landfills for anything.
Oh,
Well, that is an issue, yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't really know. I had a great conversation with the guy who Steve Brown. Do you guys know Steve Brown? He was our VP. He's a teacher at Desert Sage High School here in town, and he was telling me yesterday about, and I apparently wrote the name down wrong, but apparently there's a really promising carbon-based conductor under development that is a better conductor than copper. It's super lightweight, and it actually would sequester carbon, the construction of it, because it's made out of copper fiber. I'm sure the amount is trivial, but and I wrote down the name. I swear I had it right, but when I Google it, it just turns out to be um, some warrior orc in the Middle Earth pantheon. So apparently I wrote it down wrong. So, but
well, something to tantalize us. Kurt, looks like
And
you've got
any
a
Yeah,
comment.
thoughts on why the price of copper is plunging?
yeah, I would assume that the price of copper plunging is due to Trump's tariffs. You know, I don't know for sure, but there's just so much uncertainty as to, what's going to be tariff and how much. And you know, I think you see the same thing in world oil prices right now. Oil prices are down, like $20 a barrel since Trump levied the first tariffs. Even though, gas here in Phoenix is going up, the price of crude oil is down, the price of copper is down. So I don't really pretend to understand what's going on, but I'll blame it on the tariffs.
Thanks.
All right. Well, let's see.
It looks like the really precipitous plunge has been just in the days, like in the last week since
Oh,
the
wow.
the tariff discussion. So I believe that's what's going on.
um, if I can share my screen with you, I have a sort of fun graph here that shows copper prices going up and down. Unfortunately, the only person I can see right now has a nasty watermark on it from an early proof, but this is starting copper from 1989 to 1922. And this red line is what we calculated the copper world break-even price is about 370, 375. And so historically it's been like, it's really, really volatile. And I guess that's the main message, is that copper is volatile. It really jumps all over the place.
Hmm.
And
Thank
if you
you.
Google copper price today, you'll see what's been happening in the last week or so.
Going back to an earlier comment, you were talking, Rob, about dust from tailings, and you said that there is some mitigation that is done by the mining companies, but you implied strongly that it's not adequate. What are they doing, and what more should they be doing?
I'm not sure exactly what chemicals they're using, like on the existing tailings over at our SARFO and so on. But typically, you put wet solutions on the top, and so I do know this isn't probably what they're using there. I just don't know what they're using. But on the Santa Rita Road right now, that is getting everybody so excited because there's huge amounts of dust blowing from the trucks going across that unpaved road, and they're putting something that's called gorilla snot on it. That's HUD Bay just said, well, they're gonna do that as a short term response. Probably, if they ever get the go ahead on the mine, they'll probably end up paving that road. But for right now, they're using gorilla snot, but it doesn't work very well when you put trucks on it. Another thing I learned about the dust and tailing piles, that it tends to blow off the sides of the piles and not the tops.
Hmm.
And I guess it sort of makes sense if you think the wind's blowing and it's going to hit this, it's going to sort of hit the side of the pile. Anyway, and it blows along, it blows a long way. I read a meta-analysis of mines all over the world, copper mines all over the world, where they were basically going out and seeing how far away they found the contamination. And it was, on average, 30 miles to 50 miles that stuff blows. So, I know folks who are 10 or 15 miles away from this think they don't have to worry, but it blows a long way. And, the reason I guess I alluded to it failing is I don't think there hasn't been a big blow in the last few years, but there was about a 6-year period in the sort of early to mid 2000s. I forget exactly when, but near, maybe 2016, 18, around in there was like a 6-year period where the mines there were getting repeatedly fined by ADEQ for letting the stuff blow into the community, and they'd have to send out cleanup teams. And it wasn't like a one-time deal. It happened year after year. So, it's not it ain't a perfect system for sure.
Hmm. We just got a message from David Briggs, and David, if you want to elaborate beyond, I'll just read what you wrote, and then I think Kurt and Rob might have comments. David notes that the closure of secondary copper melting and refining facilities in this country during the early 2000s resulted in most of America's recycled copper being exported abroad for treatment. So all those things we turned into our metal scrap place apparently going offshore. Although recent domestic treatment of copper scraps has resumed at several new domestic facilities, much of our recycled copper continues to be processed at offshore locations, much of it going to and remaining in China. Any comments on that?
Fascinating. I did not know that. That's fascinating. I want to know more.
Yeah.
A lot of I don't know about recycling, but most of the copper concentrate goes to China because we don't have smelter capacity here in the United States. We have one big Kennecott smelter up in Utah and one small one in Miami. And I believe those are the only two copper smelters existing still in the United States. Asarco shut theirs down a few years ago. And, so we've been using that as a tool. A lot of Republicans don't like China. So if you tell them, how's it going to help our national defense if we're sending all of our copper to China? It's a good argument, except, I'm afraid what it'll result in is building a new copper smelter here, which I also don't want.
Because
Well, because they're filthy, because the smoke that comes out, what comes out of the smokestack is highly toxic.
so are you saying then that recycling copper is not a really winning proposition?
No, not recycling copper. If you're recycling copper, you're not smelting, you're just melting.
Okay.
Smelting is removing the oxides and other compounds from the pure copper. But if
Mhm.
you're starting with pure copper, you just need to remelt it.
Okay. So recycling copper would still be a gain if we can recover it and treat that. That would
Yeah,
be
I think that's a good idea. That might prevent, you know, some mines from opening up.
Okay. And let's see.
I wonder, could I ask a question? This is
Please, go ahead.
Dwayne. I'm wondering, just taking a step back and considering all of the ways in which our mining and extractive industries are hard to understand as elements of a sustainable society. Um, does it point to a need for us to eliminate a lot of the things that have become accustomed to in the industrial age from our use and I'm just trying to think about sustainability in relation to mining in general. I would be interested in anybody's thoughts on that.
You're getting a few knowing nods from the audience.
All I can say is I've been having lots of questions lately as I ordered the electronics that we needed for our board retreat and for our upcoming rallies from Amazon. It didn't feel right, but I didn't have a choice.
Hmm. Well, while we ponder that, Paula, do you have another question?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to bring up yet another potential mine area. And if you have anything to say about what's going on with plans for the lower San Pedro River area, I think it's Copper Creek and what they're looking at there, and if there's anything that could be done to mitigate the harm that that's likely to cause. Like we don't have enough going on with the mines you've already talked about.
I don't know.
Well, we're working on that project a little bit, but I'm not fully up to speed on it. Uh, Copper Creek is near Mammoth, Arizona, and it's owned by a company called Faraday Copper. And yeah, I can't tell you too much more about it yet.
Is Faraday local or, I mean, a US company or?
I can't even tell you that.
Okay, we'll check
I
into,
would have to Google it.
okay, we'll check into that.
I think it's another Canadian one. Let me see if I can find out.
Oh, wow.
Um, and yeah, I gave a talk there recently in Mammoth, and Kurt, do you remember the name of the mine that was there? Thinking Saint something, I don't remember. But anyway,
No, I don't.
tying one of the things I learned there, tying into when I was with those other folks talking about the mine, was that apparently they did smelting there. But the smelter, when they closed the mine, the smelter was sold off to some company in Latin America.
Well,
Or
we
so I
are,
was told.
say again?
Oh, I was told by some folks there who've lived in the community for a long time that that smelting originally took place at the mine there. That there's now Faraday's looking at reopening, but that the smelter was sold off to a company in Latin America.
Well, we're getting close to the end, and that's often when the questions get the most kind of exciting and deep. There's a a comment. David Briggs has put a couple of comments in, and I'm copying them for just the record, that ramifying on what Curt was saying about melting versus smelting copper and so on. Then Laura Key says magma copper mine. Maybe that's referring to what you were searching for, Rob. Joyce says, how can we use less copper? Are there alternatives to what copper is currently used in, or ways to use less? And before someone jumps in that, it's been pointed out that we have someone from AZ Department of Environmental Quality here, and certainly you are invited if you would like to comment on anything you've heard today. Maybe you'd like to just keep listening, but we certainly would welcome any comments you'd like to add.
By the way, Faraday is Canadian.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi.
Okay.
My name is Grant. I'm more here of just a citizen of Tucson,
Okay.
interested, yeah, but I do work in the Surface Water Quality Improvement Unit, and we are working on projects in Queen Creek and the Patagonia Mountains. So if anybody has any thoughts, feel free to reach out. But yeah, I don't know. I've just been really enjoying the conversation and hearing all your thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you, Grant, for that and for putting your voice in the room tonight. Okay, so I'm going to just open the floor for a last comment, or maybe two, depending. David, did you wish to elaborate, David Briggs, any further on some of your comments? It looks like you're satisfied. And okay, so the San Manuel smelter was one of the last operating smelters. So Curt, now to make it clear, you're saying there are still 2 smelters in the US?
Yeah, there's a big one owned by Rio Tinto, which is, Kennecott is a subsidiary of Rio Tinto.
Okay.
There's a big smelter in Utah, but it's pretty much filled up with the output of the Kennecott open pit copper mine. And there's a small smelter still operating in Miami, Arizona. Those
Okay.
are the only 2 that I know of.
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, Asarco, I think it was sold to Grupo Mexico in Hayden, and I think that was shut down a couple of years ago. So I don't think that one's operating anymore.
Right. Well, we've heard about some of the risks and harms that can be done by mining, and we've been asked to consider as a culture, really, how do we work with this situation we're in, where there's so many materials that we seem to still want to pull out of the earth, and maybe do we have enough materials already to do and satisfy the needs that we have as a human being? And this will be part of an ongoing conversation, I'm sure. Thank you so many people for contributing questions and comments such as that perspective. And thank you, Rob and Curt, for really being right in front, looking at these issues and advocating for public health and a beautiful environment that we can enjoy for generations to come. This is really part of what Sustainable Tucson is dedicated to, living in harmony with our desert environment, in equity and in harmony with each other. Paula, any last comments before we close?
Well, I want to echo your thanks to Rob and Curt for a lot of information, and I think also a kind of call to action. I think what we'll try to do is put together some of the information about where people can find information about these federal mining laws, as well as what they and who they might contact about those to advocate for or against what needs to happen, as well as some of the information about where they could advocate for or against, I think in almost all cases for us, what's going on in a number of places around Arizona. We heard about primarily just about two, but there are plans for, well, like the Copper Creek one that I mentioned, and I think people are also looking at what might be going on in the Galiurth Mountains. So it's all sort of feels like Arizona is under attack. And we'll see what we can maybe do to fend that off. Thank you so much. And it was this is really something that we're going to want to keep a close eye on as we move forward.
I'll jump in. Thank you, Mabel, for joining the advocacy list. And I really encourage everybody to get on that list. And that is your opportunity at least once a week to send a letter to someone or someone's on issues such as Curt and Rob have raised for us. And just to call out to Robin Motzer, who talked to Ron Barber when he was still serving in legislative role. And Barber's comment was that that the Nevada senator, whose name is Gary Reed, yeah, who he was apparently beholden to the mining interest. That was Ron Barber's interpretation. So we've got some work still cut out for us. We'll carry on, Robin. I hope you will, along with us.
If I could share my screen for one more second, I just wanted to show for those who are interested in doing, doing some action right now. We just set up a sort of sister website that is stopcopperworld.com. And it's specifically focused on our actions right now. Our main website is SaveTheScenicSantaRitas.org. But this is a link for signing up or getting more information about our meeting this Saturday in Sahuarita. And then if you scroll down further, there's a button here that will take you to our main website and give you information about specific letters that you could write, emails, who you could write them to, like this is on the truck traffic, etc. And then scrolling down here is having to do with the ADQ air permit that we're appealing right now. So yeah, so stopcopperworld.com. I love getting URLs. Also, when we let our economics report out, I put it on copperworldeconomics.com. I love it. So
okay.
So if you feel like writing an email, you can go to stopcopperworld.com.
Okay.
Well, and we'll be sure to put that information and information about the rally coming up May 3rd. We put a save the date in our most recent Sustainable Tucson newsletter, and we'll be putting information about that so you can save the date. May 3rd, downtown Tucson. You'll be able to protest the mining in the Santa Ritas.